You know, Joan being the great agent that she is, and coming up after her is a bit challenging to come up with some information that she hasn't already covered. So I'm going to let her kind of have that, and I'll bring up something that you've probably never heard before, and really it's against a lot of the conventional realtor ways of doing business. So, but first I wanted to start off by dedicating this presentation to a mentor of mine who is down on his luck. He got hurt a couple of weeks ago, suffering from paralysis. Gary Stallings. I went to see him last week, and he's making a lot of very good recovery. Started to move his finger and thumb, and stretched out his legs, and so he's going to be on a full recovery. It's just going to probably take 6 months to a year. So, just my thoughts and prayers are with him. He's one of the guys that I worked with over the years and helped me become what I am today. I have a lot of good agents that kind of helped me along the way. So I'm very thankful to be given an opportunity to help agents do the same. My background is, you know, I guess my passion for real estate developed very early in my life. You know, every year I went to a different elementary school until my mother moved to Kingwood in 1987. I went to a total of 8 different elementary schools as a kid growing up, okay, all over Houston. So there's good in that because I've met a bunch of different type of people. I mean, you know, kids growing up, but just different type of cultures. So the family homestead became a very strong desire to me. And many of the friends that I made here in Kingwood and in Kingwood Middle School, in fact, are still my best friends today and live all over the country. So Kingwood's a very special place to me. I graduated in Kingwood in 1995. I delivered pizzas from my senior year of high school all the way to my internship in college. And I paid my way through college doing that. I married my high school sweetheart, Kristen, who is also recognized as, out of a lot of outstanding teachers at Bear Branch Elementary, one of the most recognized teachers there. I've got 3 wonderful children, ages of 16, 6, and 5. And I went to Kingwood College back in the day when it was called Kingwood College. Graduated University of Houston with honors, 2 degrees in architecture, and a minor degree in construction management. Okay, I interned at Brand Allen, which is a design firm for high-end retail. Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Tiffany & Company, Swarovski's. Those were the type of people that we did business with. After I graduated, my mother sold her business and while I was in college and opened up a mortgage company. And so she has a mortgage business. I thought, you know, I've got all this time in my hands, why not just get a real estate license? I had absolutely no intention of becoming a real estate agent. I was introduced to real estate investing in the business when my resume caught the attention of one of the most successful residential real estate investors in Houston, and I would say one of the top in the country. My first day of real estate, the owner of Homevestors gave me a list of 25 houses and said, here you are, go put out your signs and riders and answer the phone. Now, for a lot of you new agents out here, he knew that I didn't know anything about real estate other than what I learned at the school. But what he did know is how hard I worked in college and raised a family. I had a son in college and raised him through school and graduated with the honors that I did at the same time. So he already had a listing broker that listed these properties, and which meant that I had to outperform the rest of the real estate market, or else I didn't get a commission, because I wasn't the listing agent. I was only a buyer's agent, and I had to find that buyer first. So after years of working with this investment firm, over the years, I eventually subsidized the owner of that company's position. I started to work for that company, and in 2007, I bought over 50 houses for that firm. And then in 2008, when the market crashed, I managed a real estate team to liquidate that portfolio, and along with hard money investment bank foreclosures that they were taking on that year. So I gained a lot of experience real fast, but not in a conventional sense as a normal realtor would. It was a lot of hustle. It was a lot of outside the box type of marketing and strategy. And I'm going to share some of that with y'all today. After 2008, I left. It was just a crazy year, and you had to change your strategies. I worked with Gary Stallings over at Champions, Glenlock Farms, Spring, and for a few years. And then I went to, foreclosures were hot, so I went and I sold foreclosures at Trillionaire Assets for a couple of years there. So I've got a good mixture of different types of properties, different types of ranges. And you know, last week, Joan, one of the greatest agents that we all know here, talked a lot about what she did, farming, don't stop, keep farming, and that's how she made her big, legend, really, and how what she does today still. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit different. Farming, I'm doing those things as well. It takes time, and I'm, be quite honest with you, transitioning my business and using the investment business and the strategies to keep my income and business to where I like it, and at the same time ease into what something like Joan is doing. And so what I want to talk about today is how to go hunting instead of farming, how to go out there and go outside the box. One thing that I've noticed working all over Houston and then finally working here in Kingwood is agents at RE/MAX are more educated. They're some of the top agents that I've met. When I first got into this business, I didn't like real estate agents. You know, of course, I had a real estate license, but they were my competition, right? And not only that, but there were so many unprofessional agents, and really, I think in the public's eyes, a lot of realtors kind of bring down that name, the realtor. I mean, a lot of people don't have a high regard. I think Buddy mentioned yesterday, one of the largest complaints is poor representation. So what I'm going to talk today about is when you're working in Kingwood, you've got a lot of very good agents that you're up against. And when you go outside of Kingwood, all over Houston, the tables turn, and you have a lot of unprofessional agents, and you can take advantage of that and capture all the business that you really want. I mean, you can go crazy in this business. And that's one of the things that Joan was talking about last week that I completely agree with. You have to have balance with your family and with your business. And if you don't, you'll burn out, no matter what you do, no matter if you're farming or hunting or whatever the case is. So we'll kind of go through some of these slides. I just kind of, last night, put together some basic things that I wanted you guys to kind of see some of the basic points. But you've got to get the phone to ring. And if John Seldner is sharing an office with me, and poor guy, he gets to hear my phone ring all the time. And I'm on the phone all the time. My cell phone rings more than anybody's cell phone here, I'm sure. And it's because of all the properties all around Houston and all that, the leads get transferred to me and sent to me. You've got to get those phones to ring. Now, when I first started in this business, I did things that would be perceived as probably not the appropriate things to do. We used things like bandit signs. Of course, I was working for a real estate investment company. I was working at a generic office. And, we didn't get in any trouble. We were very careful what we did. But we used things like bandit signs. We didn't use Craigslist, but today it's one of the free things you can do. Great tool. You can do exactly what I did, and you've got more tools to do it with. And you can use things like the Craigslist. If you don't have listings, Frank taught several classes on how to use the Craigslist to your advantage. It's a huge tool. And if you just have to devote the time to doing it, and it will generate you leads. And honestly, I think you're going to get a lot of junk leads, and one of the things I want to talk to you about is filtering. Because what's different from what I do than what a conventional agent does is a conventional agent is just waiting for that phone to ring, and then it's almost like rushing to do whatever they can do for that buyer. They don't know if the lead's good or not. And if they're not pre-qualified, what are you going to do? Oh, refer them to a loan officer. Well, I have a mortgage license as well. And I used to have my license active with a mortgage company, and I used to send a ton of referral business. And that's how I was paid referrals by working for that company. Today I don't have that active license, but I still retain that knowledge. I'm very knowledgeable with the mortgage guidelines. So I use that when I talk a little bit later about filtering. We'll talk a little bit about that. But some of the things here to get that phone to ring is you have to create a hook in your ad. Okay, now back in the day we would put things like you could used to do $500 total move-in. Okay, you really can't do that anymore in this market except for USDA areas. There is no down payment in a USDA area. USDA is right across the border for us, right there in Montgomery County, in Dayton. Just not very far, and you can put ads on Craigslist. You can put ads in the local, Houston community newspaper on the outskirts areas and advertise those type of things. Be sure to check with Buddy and make sure you follow whatever the proper guidelines are for your advertisements. But back in the day, I didn't have those guidelines, and if I did, we broke them. I was working for a generic company, so we pushed the envelope. So some of the things I'm going to talk about, be sure and make sure you're doing it, and do it at your own risk, I would say. But you've asked me to come and share some of these ideas that made me where I'm at today. I'm going to do that. Newspaper ads, they're a little bit more expensive, but they work. Back in the day, I used to do. I would have a house on like the south side of town, and it was $65,000. Now you can't find a house for $65,000, so you're in a better position than I was when I started. But I would advertise, house for sale, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage, $65,000. And $500 total move-in, or whatever the hook had to be. There was a hook there that made that buyer pick up that call. Now every buyer in town is going to call you. Now then you have to develop a system for filtering that buyer, and you really need to expand your knowledge on mortgage guidelines. So I would recommend when you take your next update class for your MEC or whatever, your continuing education, is to look into things that support your filtering. Support your business, and I think mortgage information and guidelines is a very important part of that. Signs, bandit signs, we talked some about that, but I'm talking all kinds of signs. I mean, you can wrap your car, you can put magnets, I've got bikes that you ride in Galveston. Maybe some of y'all have seen around Kingwood, but I put signs on those, Remax and things. I've got a custom golf cart where we wrap in the parade. All kinds of things are opportunities to put that hook out there to get that phone to ring. The biggest tools that I use when I got started was the newspaper ads, and I would use Craigslist and bandit signs is what I used. And you could actually put riders out, just talk to Buddy, of course, and business cards. I didn't bring any cards with me, but on my cards, I have my pertinent information on the front, on the back. I pay extra money to just have a little advertisement, a hook. My commitment to you is to outperform any realtor. And I want that bar set high, and I want them to hold me accountable for that. And so those are some of the things that I use to generate those leads and get that phone to ring. Once you have the phone ringing, then you have to be very careful on how to filter those leads. And Frank talked about some of the things that I'll talk about, and I learned this, over 10 years ago, and here I am hearing it again with some of these things that Frank's going through. So these classes that he has are extremely valuable. One of the first things I learned that helped me filter the leads and be very successful with focusing on buyers is knowing how to qualify that lead. And you have 3 key elements that you're looking for to rate them as an A buyer, B buyer, or C buyer. And one is, are they qualified? Okay. If you don't know, or if you're not comfortable on the phone, write out a script and then use that script. Okay, and it'll help you kind of develop your routine. When a prospect calls, I typically would give them information that they're asking for. And then I always get the information that I need to make my decision on where I go from there, to determine how to rate them. Always ask them if they're working with an agent. If they're working with an agent, I'm done. You know, I'm not going to try to get them to switch over or anything like that. It's just I can't help them. Many times their agents out of town, and they, a lot of y'all have seen that. But what's also important is ask them, are you working with a loan officer? Because they may not be working with an agent, but they may have went to their credit union or their bank, and they're not going to refer them to an agent. And if they're not, then that's a very good sign. If that buyer has a loan officer, then I typically talk about their income. Because the 2 key things I'm looking for is, 1, do they have the credit? Are they pre-qualified? And even if they're not, I want to pre-qualify them myself in my own mind to know if I should go and meet them. But they have to have 2 years of tax returns. That's the most important thing. A lot of people think it's credit, but you can have 800 credit scores. If you don't have your tax returns filed, you can't get a loan. So then I ask about those credit scores, always secondary. The buyers are always thinking, oh, I'm concerned about my credit. Well, the income tax returns are the most important. Typically, in the ranges that this strategy works well in, is going to be certainly under 271 for FHA guidelines, but the real number's always been around 150 and below. So in order to do a nice, income, you've got to do a high volume. And that's why you have to get those phones to ring. And so I always ask them about their credit scores. A lot of times they know what they are. If they know their credit scores are in the 580 range, then I immediately shift gears and send them to credit repair or something like that. Of course, I'm very familiar with the guidelines. I recommend that you would do those things and look at those guidelines on the mortgages. I need to determine if they're qualified enough for me to meet with them. Now, I'll say this, which goes against conventional training, is a lot of people want to bring that agent into the office, or that buyer, into the office. And if you're working all over Houston, that's just not going to happen. So what I do is I pre-qualify them in my own sense by, interviewing them basically over the phone. And then if I know that they say, look, I've got good credit, then they're not typically going to lie to you. You're going to eventually run down the road and run into someone that just totally blatantly lied, and that happens everywhere. But the grand scheme of things is you're trying to find those buyers before an agent finds them.
Thomas, do you ever ask them to give you a credit report?
No, I don't. I ask them to go over the credit report. There are so many different credit reports out there that a lot of them will say different things. So it doesn't really matter. They're just so inaccurate. So the mortgage credit report, they're typically not going to have. I mean, it's very rare that a loan officer actually will give them a copy of one of the credit reports that they have.
Like creditkarma.com?
They're just not as accurate as the mortgage. The mortgage company will not use that credit report. They use TransUnion and some other companies. And now if they know what that score is, that's all I ask for. Is what is the score? Do you have any judgments? Do you have any student loan in default? Because you can have good credit and still have those things. And if you have those things, those have to be taken care of before you can move forward. So you just have to kind of fill it out, and that next question depends on what that answer is. So, but if they say the right answers, I'm going and setting that appointment. Okay? And so the next part of the filter is you check their motivation. And so I always want to verify before I hit the road is, are they committed to anything? Do they have a lease? Do they have a house to sell? Do they have, what's their time frame?
before you leave that appointment part, you said you work all over town in these kind of situations, that's going to happen. Where do you set the appointment? They're not coming to the office, to their home or their office? Or
Well, okay, most of the time it is at the house that they're calling about, because that buyer in that price range is really only concerned, they don't know what to do. They don't know what the right thing to do is. No one's ever told them. Many times they're first-time home buyers. And so all they know is, oh, I want to see this house. Well, that's great. If they want to see that house, I know where to meet them at. I know that they're getting something out of this meeting. I want to get what I want out of this meeting. And what I want is loyalty, motivation, and qualification. Well, I'm not going to get that loyalty right over the phone, but I can get the motivation and the qualification. So my next step is check their motivation. You know, what time frame do they have? If they're not really looking to make a decision until Christmas, I'm not really interested in driving across town to meet them. Okay. Of course, I ask them, are they ready to get pre-qualified? Are they pre-qualified? If they're pre-qualified, those are signs of motivation. You know, not only they're qualified, but they've already taken those steps without me pushing them to do that. A lot of these buyers, you have to essentially take their hand and walk them every step of the way. They are high maintenance. Then I give them options. I don't just say, okay, what time you want to meet at? You know, I say, look, this is what I have available in my schedule. And I'll give them typically 2 different times. And we'll try to make one of those times work. And but I don't do it according to their schedule. And most of the time, everyone wants us to do it on the weekends. You know, if I can avoid doing appointments on the weekends, I book them Monday. You know, it just depends on what the situation is. I need to determine if they're motivated enough for me to work with them. So that's what this filtering is all about. Then when I get to meet with them, then I start looking into the loyalty factor. And what you're going to find is when you work in Kingwood, the loyalty issue is much more difficult to gain. You know, the buyers are more savvy, they're more educated, and they just, they don't feel like they need you. And then so you really have to prove yourself worthy. In effect, you've got to be knowledgeable, like Joan was saying. You've got to know, yes, Mr. Joan over here sold his house $235. You know, you've got to know your neighborhood, and that really kind of falls more in line when you're focusing in Kingwood and trying to get those listing leads and conversions. But when I'm dealing with buyers, I want to, of course, use a script if you're not used to doing it, but just demonstrate great customer service. That's what they recognize when they go to a restaurant or wherever. That's what they are used to, and you owe it to them, because all the other agents out there in the outskirts of Houston and other outside of Kingwood and outside the Woodlands and outside of Cinco Ranch, if you're working in these areas that aren't preferred, there aren't going to be agents that are top producing agents in those areas. There's no dominant agent, and there's poor customer service. So it makes it really easy for you to shine. And then you gain that loyalty that way. Of course, build that rapport with that buyer, relate to them. And then, of course, bring that value. Because Joan was talking about this last week. It works in every case. You need to prove your value to them. And when you do that, it's much easier on these leads outside the Kingwood area. Of course, I need to determine if they're loyal. If they're, after meeting with them, if they don't seem like they're loyal, you've got to be very careful. Most people are grateful. They're not very knowledgeable. They're totally in the dark, and you've got to be that light for them, and you'll earn their loyalty.
Thomas, does the buyer's rep agreement come in here at this
I
point?
don't use the buyer's rep agreement until I write a contract. Because if a buyer's not going to be loyal to me, I just move on. What am I going to do? They're not loyal. I'm going to go after them. I just don't have the time for those things. So the buyer's rep, now there's strategies on selling the buyer's rep agreement. Oh, I can represent you this way and that. But that makes that type of buyer uncomfortable and it feels like you're trying to lock me in, you're trying to suck me in. They just aren't familiar with contracts. When you start off with a contract, well, look, this is how it's done and this is what you owe me, and if I can't get my commission this way, then I'm going to have to come to you for it. I mean, when have I ever come to a buyer for a commission? Except for this month. I'm doing it now. Matter of fact, I need to talk to you about that. When you go to a buyer for a commission, the next problem you have is the mortgage company. Mortgage companies wants you to do all kinds of crazy things. That's what I need to talk to you about. But very rarely, I mean, you know what? When you prove your value, you'll find those buyers that say, you know what? I have this house. It's for, in this market, you're seeing it more. A house is for sale by owner. And they go, look, I want to buy this house. And I'm like, well, the owner doesn't want to pay me. You know, I've already protected you. I've already terminated your other deal. You're under contract. We negotiated, went through repairs. You're safe. You know I'm worth my keep. They said, okay, fine, we'll pay you. And that's what's going on. So let's see. So let's get into presentation. So when you meet that buyer, I believe the presentation actually starts before you meet them. It starts on that phone. Okay, and you need to understand what they really want. The psychology plays a role in this. You know, a higher end buyer has different needs than a middle class or lower end buyer. You know, the higher end is much more educated. Their needs are just different, and this strategy is focused on that lower end type buyer. And so you have to understand that and understand what they want and the angle they're coming from. The presentation always involves a giving and receiving, and Frank's talked about that in some of his classes as well. Always collect that information during that presentation, and they don't even know it. You're just talking, and you're building that rapport, and you're just talking about the things that you need to know about. And it's just as simple as that. And then listen carefully to what their concerns are, because you may be trying to fix something that they're not even concerned about that's broken. You know, you may say, oh, you need this representation. They're not concerned about that. Maybe they're concerned about, you know, something, the dishwasher not working. You need to listen to those concerns and what their goals are. And then I always share mortgage information. I don't do the loans, but I don't feel like there's anything wrong with sharing more information to that buyer so they're more comfortable when they comes to approach that loan officer. I try to recommend and work with loan officers that I've worked with for over a decade, but I don't always get to. And loan officers, even the ones I work with, they don't do near as good of a job as I do, I feel, as communicating with that buyer. I made that first step, that initial meeting, and built that rapport, and now I'm referring them to somebody, and then I don't know how that person does how their communication skills are and how they do their business. But I do know that when I talk to them, I prep them to meet with a loan officer, and let's say I've already done that, and build their confidence. A lot of these buyers, they just don't know that, look, if you've got reasonable credit and you've got a good income and you verified your taxes, you're more than halfway there. Yeah, there's a lot of other documents you need, but those are the big ones. You've got them. If you've got those, you're most likely getting a home for your family. So you build their confidence in that presentation as well, and they'll respect you for that. Always bring value to the table. I present myself to the buyers as the real estate expert. With that information that I bring. I use also when I'm on the phone, when I'm in a meeting at the house, I passed out a couple of things on the tables here. You can see HAR gives every agent a HAR website. And HAR also gives every agent the opportunity to participate in the rating system. And I imagine some of y'all do and some of y'all don't. The fact is, most agents in these areas that I'm working a lot in are nowhere, they're not even aware of having the rating system, and they don't utilize it. So when you show the buyer something like that, on my phone I have it saved in my text, where if you type in that URL, they can click it and it just opens up the page right away, and they can see it right from their phone. So when I'm talking to someone, I'm immediately after the conversation texting them information, and they know to review the ratings of Thomas Saunders, click this, and they do that. And I think there's 20 pages of reviews that I have over the years, and about 79 people have responded. You're going to find that about 50% of people don't respond to those that take the time to do that survey at the end of the transaction. And it's okay. As long as you don't get bad ones, I'm happy.
So, Thomas, I saw that you've got like a 4.9, which I'm sure is due to outstanding service, but I'm wondering if you're doing any more, like in communication with your clients, in regard to the survey, to keep your numbers so high.
It's an excellent question. At first, no, I did not do anything. I would just send it to them, or Har would send it to them, and then, but no, what I do now, and it's actually helped, I prep them for it. I at the end of the transaction, I make sure, I say, look, I've really enjoyed working with you. Is there anything else I can do for you? Is there anything else I can do to make this an outstanding transaction? And prep them and say, great. You know what? Harv's going to be sending you a survey. It's very important to me if you take the time to share some of your comments and your thoughts. The entire world will see this, and it means a lot to me and my long-term reputation. And if I haven't done anything, tell me what I can do to right now to make that right. And so you want to fill that out, and prep them. And that helps your numbers greatly increase. Okay. Let's see what else. So yeah, then I talked about, I have the link in the text message. It works awesome and it looks very professional. So go on there and do some work. On that page, most agents don't do this, but there's a way where you can actually put in on the front page some recommendations and some history about you and what you do, and some background. And people read that, and it helps build that value that you offer. So at the showing, one thing that's very important to me, it's a pet peeve of mine, and it's a constant struggle, especially when you're driving all over Houston, is to be on time. To not be on time is disrespectful. And if the buyer's not on time, that's fine with me. But I don't want to be disrespecting them. I'm the professional. I'm the one that's trying to outperform all those other agents out there that are never on time. Okay. When I show a house, of course, I'm getting out of the way, letting them walk through it. But there's something I do that no other agent does, and a lot of other agents really are scared to do. And I help the buyer learn about the house. Because of my architectural background, construction degree, and professional, flipping houses for so many years. I've watched a lot of houses, nearly 800, get flipped and go from an ugly, dirty old carpet, cracked walls, to a beautiful, nice house upgraded with granite countertops, and it's a night and day difference. And a lot of people don't know how the presentation affects the house so much. And I help the buyer learn about what I believe are common issues that I see in most every house, and it's something that I think is very serious. Now, at the same regard, if there's anything I see, I want to be full disclosure. If I see a crack, I want them to see that crack. I don't want surprises in the option period. I want that done right up front. I want as much information that they can get up front. But I'm very clear and careful with the comments that I make, because I don't want them to be considering me as their inspector. Because a lot of times when we walk to a house, especially in these inner city areas, you're dealing with houses built in the 70s and 80s. First thing that cracks is the right side of the house where the garage door is, where that right corner is. It always settles. It's a common issue. And I'm very careful when I look at these things, but I want to bring those things to their attention. And my intention is not to, I want to kill this deal, but I want this deal to stop now before I get into it. I'd rather it die now than a couple of weeks down the road where I invested even more time into this. At the showing is the time where I like to take that time to show them what I know and exercise my expertise, but at the same time recommend that real estate inspector that licensed inspector. I don't want the responsibility. I don't mind helping them saving money and not paying the inspector $400 and then finding out there's a crack over here. You know, I look at those things, and most every agent can do something similar, especially if you go to attend the inspections. You know, I know what the inspectors are looking for. You know, when an investment company buys a house, they always ask me to go out there and look at the house, because they know that I'm going to tell them, look, you're not going to sell this house if you don't fix this. You know, so that's kind of some of that value that you're bringing to the table at the showing. Get the buyer as much information, the history on the house, you know, anything that you know, they need to know up front.
So Thomas, if you're showing 10 houses, do you do all this research on each home before showing? Or if you show 10 and they're like, I really like these 3, then you go do the home?
Yes, I do filter down the houses and build up the more of the research. When you're walking through the house, looking at cosmetic issues, pretty easy to do during a showing. But when you're looking at the history, sometimes, you know, when I have even 10 houses, sometimes if I have that time, I'm looking at the history. I may not print it out, but I'm prepping myself to be that market expert in that area. So I do look at that, but do I print things out and get real detailed into it? Not unless it's one of those top houses. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I want to be prepared in the back of my mind to know if they ask the question, well, how long has this been on the market? I know that. You know, has this house been listed before? I'm going to know those things, especially if it's under 10 houses. If it's more than 10 houses, I'm not going to have all that information. But 10 houses is about that threshold. You just really can't fit more than 10 houses a day. You know, and that's not always the case. A lot of times I'm showing 3 or 4, you know, in the same area. So it's much easier to kind of glance at that information because it's right there at your fingertips. And you can actually pull it from your phone. So you can do those things as well. Let's see. And then I always like to go over that buying process. You got to remember, these buyers aren't very sophisticated. And that's not the case for every buyer in this range, but the vast majority aren't. And if you just take that time and you just go over what they're about to go